All right. Welcome everyone to the second of our Cognos live streams here at PM Square. Apologize for the slight delay. It takes a little while to get this stuff set up. So I saw that there were a couple questions pasted in the chat while I was getting going. If I could get a heads up from you guys that you can hear me okay. So just go ahead and in the chat, if I sound good, give me a thumbs up, and if I sound bad, give me a thumbs down. Well, I'm waiting on that. We'll cover, so audio's fine, good. Okay, so what we're going to cover today, today's live stream is all about data modules. So we're going to go pretty deep into what they are, how to use them, not just from a kind of a like what features do they have perspective, but also from the perspective of, what is the ideal way to deploy them in your environment. So for those of you who participated in our previous live stream about the 11.1.4 release, you may be kind of familiar with how these live streams work and how they're different from webinars. But for anybody who wasn't here for that, just to kind of set the ground rules or the expectations, live stream is different from a webinar in that I can actually see what you're typing kind of as you type it in real time. So unlike a webinar where you might be used to just watching the presentation for 30 or 40 minutes and then the presenter just fields a couple questions at random that came in during those 30 or 40 minutes at the end. Ask all your questions live. I'll try to address them live. If there's something I don't know how to do, I do have my PM Square Slack channel up, so I can shoot questions over to some of my colleagues who maybe have some knowledge that I don't, but hopefully I'll be able to cover most of what it is that you're interested in seeing today. So I can see, looking at the chat, Stuart has some questions for me. So I'll cover, I see all that, Stuart. I'll try to cover as much of that as I can. We should be able to cover pretty much every question that you guys have today. And then Laura, insight on how to manage data modules without creating a large intertwined group of dependent models. That's a good question. So we'll get into some of that as well. For those of you who are curious, I'll be demoing out of 11.1.4 today. So out of curiosity, for those of you who are able to chat, if you could just put into the chat what version you currently have deployed in production, that would I think that would be interesting and give me some insight into kind of where you guys are compared to what it is that I'll be showing today. I do have a cup of hot tea here to keep us going. It's cold here in the Detroit area, and we got a ton of snow. It's been kind of brutal. I see some 11.1.3s, so that's good. Whatever Eric says. Yeah. Okay, 11.0.11. Okay, going to 11.1.4. So overall, pretty recent releases. That's good. I have noticed that over time, people have kind of migrated away from the way we used to always do releases in Cognos, which was, the new release would come out. It would come out once a year, and you really would wait 3 or 6 months or a whole year before you put it into production. Now that they're coming out more frequently, at first my customers were all still kind of waiting, and I feel like a lot of people have transitioned over to a cadence that can match the cadence that IBM is on, which is good. Okay, cool. Mostly 11.1.3 or 11.1.4. And then we've got Eric lagging behind at 11.0.11. Okay, so what I'm going to cover today is kind of everything data modules related. I'll show you guys how I build these, how the ways in which I build them that is different from what I do in Framework Manager, some of the techniques that I use, and then we'll get into things like, well, if you're using Framework Manager today, how do you get into data modules? Why should you get into data modules? What does that path look like? We'll talk about deploying them in in kind of the real world and how I advocate that you do that. And we'll go over all of that. But what I most want to do is answer your questions. So I'm going to start with a blank module, and we'll just start building things from there. And I'll talk through what it is I'm doing and why. I'll show some of the features. We'll get into some stuff that people asked about on LinkedIn. So if you're not connected to me on LinkedIn, just search for Ryan Dolley. I'm posting new stuff about Cognos all the time. So hopefully I'll have some interesting stuff there for you. And then before we do these live streams, I often do a post where I collect questions that people might be interested in. So I got some questions about things like, making bulk changes to data modules, and how the column dependency feature, which is what replaces determinants from Framework Manager, how does that work? So I'll cover all of that. I'm just going to, you can see I was messing around with some stuff over the course of last night and earlier today in this environment. So I'm just going to, one thing I wish they would add here is a close all button. That would be great. But we don't have a close all button yet. So maybe I'll put in an RFE. And if I do, I'll let you guys know so we can all upvote it. So given that I'm not sure the level of when should I create a new table with join or just a relationship? That's a good question, Caesar. So I'll cover that as well. I'm unsure of what the everybody's level of experience with data modules is. So I'm going to we're going to work from an assumption that there will be some people watching who maybe are very familiar with Framework Manager but don't know much about data modules. I am interested if you could punch into the chat kind of what you think your level of comfort with data modules is. Are you kind of beginner, intermediate, or advanced? That would be interesting as well. So while we're waiting on that, I'll quit with the talkie and we'll get started. So how do I create a data module? Of course, you click the new button and you can go data module. The other thing you can do, if you're building a data module off of a different object, like a data set or another data module, you can also create a data module by clicking on the, like if you go to the object that you have, right? So these data sets, right? If I wanted to, I can create a data module by going to the data set and then choosing create data module. All right, we got some beginner, intermediate. Okay. Started using them, but looking for some best practices guidance. Awesome. FM dev trying to find best use for data modules. Yeah, Laura, that's where I was for a long time too. I will tell you, I didn't, when I first saw them, I honestly didn't like them. They didn't have nearly the functionality that I needed. And then over over time, and especially since the 11.1 release came out, I think they've come a really long way. So I went to the new button there, and then I did data module. I selected from the menu that popped up, and now I can create a data module off of a number of different things, right? I can build it off of uploaded files, which you're going to see here. So I can upload a file and immediately build a data module off of that. I can build a data module off of an object in the folder structure, which I can access through here, or I can build a data module off of what is called a data server. Now, for those of you who have Framework Manager or Cognos Administrator experience, going back to Cognos 10, you're undoubtedly familiar with data sources. Data servers are really just Cognos 11 data sources. Now, one of the big differences is that those data servers or data sources in Cognos 10, those could be built using ODBC connectors or JDBC connectors, whereas the data server can only use a JDBC connector. So that is a little difference between the two, but otherwise they function basically the same. So I'll go ahead and I'll choose the Great Outdoors Sales database, and then the Go Sales schema to build this data module off of. Now, I could come in here and choose discover related tables, and this kind of gives you like an AI guided experience of, okay, I want sales information, so show me what you have related to sales information, Cognos, and this is what it came up with that it thought I would be interested in. And if I choose OK, it'll just build a model with those tables. Now, I think this is really nice for end users. I can tell you as a kind of professional developer, I never ever use this. I always go through and choose the tables that I want, which I can do through here. Hey, Mig, good to see you again. So yeah, I will talk about what you can't do versus Framework Manager as we go through this. The list has gotten pretty small for what you can and can't do between data modules and Framework Manager. So the first thing I'm going to do here is show you a technique I use a lot, and that is going to be when I'm going against a data source that is not a super clean, classic Kimball-style data warehouse. I find that one thing I do a lot is I manufacture a fact table. And especially when you've got users who are uploading lots of Excel files or giving you Excel files and saying, I want you to model this for me. I find that I manufacture fact and dimension tables a lot. So I'll show you both of those things right now. So using this data set, and again, this is the Go Sales, Great Outdoors Sales database. If you have the Cognos samples installed, you have this in the samples, and you can follow these steps at any time. Of course, this video will automatically be posted to YouTube when we end the live stream, so you'll be able to see everything there. Come back and reference it in the future. So I'm going to grab the order detail and order header tables right there and choose OK. It loads us into the data module. It recognized that there is a relationship between order header and order details, automatically did that join. It will most commonly automatically recognize joins when there's actually a primary key foreign key relationship defined in the database. It does do some degree of data analysis and attempt to automatically build joins even when there are no primary and foreign keys. But to be honest with you, I find that's pretty rare that it actually does that. And in a way, I prefer that because I don't mind defining my own join structure, right? So we've got the two tables, they're joined together. If we take a look at the two tables in the grid view, we can start to see what's in these tables. So in order details, we've got kind of the line information of what went into an order, what product was sold, how many of them, the unit cost, the sale price, that sort of thing. And then, of course, the order header contains higher level information about who bought the product as far as what the retailer was, which retailer's site was it sent to, who sold it, what was the order date, that sort of thing. Now, when I talk about manufacturing a fact, what I'm talking about is I want to present key items from these two tables as if they were a single table, more like a traditional fact table. So what I'm going to do is I can control click here to highlight the two tables, but I find that it's a little fussy. When I try to control click in the relationship view, sometimes I have to click 2 or 3 times before it will recognize that I'm clicking on that table. So another thing that you can do that is a little easier, I find, is if I look at, say, the order header table, and then I choose to view the properties, you'll notice it pops open the properties pane on the right-hand side of the screen. And then I can actually look at the relationships that I have there. And add and edit those there if I need to. Now, since Cognos has already built a relationship for me, of course, I don't have to do that, but we'll see an example of doing that a little bit later in the live stream. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to select the two tables, and then I'm going to choose New and Table. Now, what this is like, and the way to think about this if you're a Framework Manager developer, is really what we're doing here is we're going to take our order details and order header table, and we're going to treat them like they're a database query subject in the database layer of Framework Manager. And what I'm doing here now is I'm essentially building a model query subject, right? Now, we don't use those terms anymore, and we don't have the UI laid out in layers like we did in Framework Manager, but the concept is really the same. So in this case, I'm going to choose to create a view of tables. The difference between create a view of tables and create a joined view is that in a create a view of tables, the new table that we're going to build, the view that we're going to build, is going to rely on the joins of the tables that we chose, order header and order details, in order to pull in data, right? Whereas if I were to create a joined view, it would ask me to define a join at this point, rather than rely on the predefined join. Well, I already have a join, and I find it just easier in general to use the view of tables versus the joined view. So that's what I recommend that you do. And the reason for that is if I create a joined view, even though I define a join, like let me show you what this does. I create a join view, the first thing it does is ask me to build a join, right? Now what I find, what happens is I'll define a join here, but that join will not appear in the relationship diagram. So if I build a joined view, I'm going to have a table floating over here that is the result of a join between two tables, but I may not see that join in the relationship diagram. I find that confusing, so I always rely on the create a view of tables rather than create a joined view. As I'm going through this, in the chat, is this kind of the level of detail that you guys would like? I know it's kind of moving slow, but I'm really explaining why it is I'm doing the things that I'm doing. If that's a level of detail that you'd like, I'll continue like this. If you'd rather me just kind of plow through a bunch of features, we can handle it that way too. But I'm trying to kind of give you my perspective on the best way to do these things. So in this case, I'm building something, we're going to call it sales fact, right? And then you'll see that here are all the fields that exist in those two tables. So I don't want all of them. I know that right off the bat. I'm trying to make something that's simpler for end users to understand and for developers to understand. So I'm going to uncheck everything, and I'm going to go through and only choose the things that I want. So for sure I want the measures. Let's grab those. My mouse is being a little touchy here. Okay, so for sure I want the measures. And then, I want, out of here, I'm going to also want product number. Product number probably is all I'm going to take, right? And then out of the order header table, I'm going to grab order number. I want the retailer site code. I want the retailer name, maybe the sales staff code, the sales branch code. So these are going to be my keys for joining to my dimensions. For sure I want order date. And let's just grab those for now. For example, I hit the refresh button. It's going to show me the table that I've built, so I can scroll through that table and ask myself, is this what I want? Does this make sense? If it is, I click finish. And now I've got my sales fact, right? So at this point, I'm going to treat this sales fact exactly like I treat a normal table. It's going to act as if it were a normal table. So any joins I'm going to do from this point forward, say I want to join sales fact to a dimension, I'm going to join at the level of the sales fact view, rather than joining order details to one dimension and an order header to a different dimension. Now that I have combined these into the sales fact view, I'm done with them. So I literally set them aside on my view here, and then I moved the sales fact table next to them so that I have a visual reference in my head that, like, hey, this cluster of tables are all related to one another. Now at this point, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to add more tables from our data source. So let's go ahead and maybe I want some product information, right? So, well, there's a lot of product tables in here: product brand, product color lookup, product forecast, product line lookup, product size lookup. I'm just going to grab a cluster of these and drag them in. And you'll see Cognos went ahead and automatically join them all together. So that's nice, right? Like, this is a case where, well, that is what I wanted Cognos to do. Except one thing that I don't like here is that it's got this join to order details. Now remember, the practice I'm using in this case is I don't join anything to order details. I only join things to my sales fact. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hop in and let's just remove that relationship. Now I'm going to go through the same exercise that I did before, and I'm going to create a view of tables, except this time I'm going to grab all of the product-related tables. Control-click them all, choose New Table, Create View of Tables. Next, I'll call this the product dimension. And you'll see I'm just doing the same thing I did before. However, I'm using 5 tables instead of 1. Now, you might be thinking at this point, yeah, what I like in this new release is that the relationships keep their distribution. It was awful before. Yeah, yeah. It was horrible before. So for those of you who aren't sure about what Caesar is saying, in releases up to 11.1.4, the way the tables are structured here on the page, you can see a little bit in the relationships view. Every time you load it in, it was just like a spaghetti disaster of tables and joins, and no matter how you arranged them, the next time you came in, it was a disaster all over again. Now it actually holds the shape, the structure of however you arrange the tables on the page, which is why now I go through the effort of actually arranging them. In the past, I wouldn't bother because it was so, I knew the next time I came in, it was just going to look horrible again. And you'll see that as we go forward here. So from here, I'm going to grab the items that I need, right? So things like product number, type code, maybe size code, brand code, that sort of thing. Meg asks, can I bring tables from different databases? Yes, you can. I will show that after I get this product dimension built, how to do that. So, and then out of that, and I might not grab things from all of these tables, but we'll grab product line EN, and we'll grab product name lookup. Oh, here's a good one that I'll show you. So product name, and then product type, we'll grab product type EN, right? So really, if you think about this, what have I built here? I've got the codes, right? So product number, product type, product size that I need to join to other tables. And then I've got product name, product type, and then let's grab, product line code. So again, I have essentially built a table that's got keys and then descriptive elements, kind of a classic dimension that I've constructed out of those underlying tables. So now I've got my product dimension. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do 2 things. So the first thing is I'm going to join sales fact to product dimension. Control click them both, choose relationship. Now you'll see the order that you click those in will determine what counts as table 1 and table 2. But if you want to swap that, like in this case, I don't want a one-to-many, I want a many-to-one. It's in this menu right here. So now I've got my sales fact with my N, my product dimension with my 1. I want to join on product number, so I'll go ahead and select those 2. Choose match selected columns. It goes ahead and gives me this data preview, which I really like how they've done that. There are some things about this UI I would like them to redesign, but overall I find that it's pretty good. I choose OK. Now I've got my kind of classic join, one-to-many with the 1 on the dimension and the many on the sales fact. And then what I'll do, I'll address that question in a sec, Jerry. What I'll do is I'll structure these in such a way that I have the tables that feed the product dimension clustered together near one another, and then near the product dimension, and the tables that make up the sales fact clustered near one another next to the sales fact. So that's one way to do that. The second thing that I'll do, remember the whole reason we're doing this is to make this easier for our end users to consume and interact with. So the next thing I'm going to do is I don't want my end users looking at this. And the thing to keep in mind is whatever you have here is exactly what the end users are going to see, right? Whatever it is, with one exception, and that exception is that you can hide any of these things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'll make a new folder, and I'll call this folder product dimension tables. Okay, and then I'm going to grab all of those product dimension tables, right, that built the product dimension view that I've constructed here in data modules. I'm going to drop them all into the product dimension tables folder, like so, and then I will move that so it's under the product dimension. And then when I go in here and look at the properties, you'll see hide from users. So now it's grayed out, and my end users aren't going to see it. But it's still there, and it's really easy for me to understand, and for other developers who may come in here to understand what is going on, what tables feed the product dimension. I'm doing everything I can to make that just as clear as possible, to make this as easy as possible to support. So then I'm going to do the exact same thing, make a new folder, sales fact tables, move that under the sales fact, control click the order details and order header table, and then I'll go ahead and hide those from my users too. So now you can I have some kind of weird timeout or something on this headset that I can't figure out, that sometimes cuts my audio. I think that it's related to, like, there's nothing actually playing through the earphones. So like it thinks that I've just left it on the table and walked away, and it's turning off. I guess that's what I get for buying this like gamer headset when I'm 36, right? Is I don't know how to use it. This is like I'm way too young for it, but I guess this is the beginning of my okay boomer lifestyle. So what was I talking about? Organizing this. So now I've got this organized where when an end user were to come in, they would just see these two tables. They're not going to see anything underneath it. So I'm going to jump in. Now I'm going to bring in a table from another database. I'll show what that looks like. And then I'm also going to address Jerry's question. So he says we'll get one upgrade from 4 to 5 in December 2019 till the end of 2020. Do you think release 4 is a good choice? Should I wait till... yeah, so I'm not sure. Jerry, I'm not sure where it was that you heard that there would only be one release between now and the end of 2020. But because as far as I know, R5 is going to come out theoretically. I mean, obviously, you can't take my word for it, right? I'm not IBM, and you can't even take IBM's word for it. This is software development. Things happen. But my understanding is that there will likely be one more release before the end of the year, which would be R5. And then R6 will come sometime in early 2020. So my advice really is, in general, is to get to the latest release as quickly as possible. Oh, your company is preventing another. Okay, thanks, Jerry. Thanks for the clarification. Till the end of 2020. Well, that's unfortunate. So, understanding. So, for those of you who don't know, Jerry is a client of mine, and so I'm familiar with Jerry's deployment and what's going on in Jerry's organization and that sort of thing. And so, obviously, I don't want to say anything about any of that. But yeah, I mean, so Jerry, in your specific case, I mean, given what I know, I would hesitate. Like, if you guys think you're ready to do an upgrade, 11.1.4 is a great version, and I would hesitate in your case to tell you, oh yeah, for sure, wait for 11.1.5, because I can't say for certain when 11.1.5 is coming, and if you guys are ready to do an upgrade in the near term, I wouldn't necessarily say no, hold off, because who knows whether or not you'll be ready to do an upgrade when R5 rolls around. All that said, my general advice is always go to the most recent release as quickly as possible. because with the exception of like real showstopper bugs, uh, you're only going to get your bug fixes in the next release. There is no more kind of fix pack versus feature pack like we had in 2012 on the 10 release stream. So for you, Jerry, if you guys are feeling like hey, we could go to our like we can upgrade at any point, like, oh, we're ready to start upgrading next week, I might just do it. Otherwise, if you only got one shot at it, it might be worth waiting for R5. Now, I don't know what's going to come in for sure. What's going to come in R5? I have seen some things. It looks like a good release, but I don't know that I've seen anything in it that's such a huge slam dunk that I would for sure wait for it. I guess all of that it's a typical consultant answer, right? Which is it depends. But yeah, in general, always go to the most recent release as quickly as possible. In your specific case, Jerry, if you guys are ready to go to 11.1.4 now, it might be worth going to now. Yeah, Mike makes the point. People sometimes try to stay one release back, but generally what we see is something like 5 bugs introduced in a new version that weren't in the previous, but 100 plus bugs fixed in the new version. That and that is true. So yeah, I definitely go to the most recent release as quickly as possible. Mig says, doesn't R5 have great new prompts? So that would be the awesome new thing that is theoretically coming in R5, would be a whole new set of prompts that are available in reporting. And they do look very cool. So they showed us that at the Data and AI Forum that took place, what was it, 3 or 4 weeks ago now in Miami. So that would be something definitely to look forward to. And if that does ship in R5, I would say, yeah, that's a reason to wait for R5. I would expect it in R5. It's just hard for me to tell you for sure what features are going to show up there, but that is definitely on the schedule for release. So I personally think it would be worth waiting for. Okay, enough with the upgrade talk for now. Adding a table from another database. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to click the plus here, go to add new sources, and you'll see it's going to take me through the exact same set of steps. Except in this case, I'm going to choose a table from the Great Outdoors Warehouse. Now, again, in the samples so that you guys will be able to follow along with this later. Now, I'll bring this table in. Let's say we just want to bring in a time dimension. I'll throw out the caveat that as I'm going through this, I am for these live streams, I do not spend an inordinate amount of time prepping them and having really clean demo content like I would if you were a new customer who's considering buying Cognos, where I want to know everything I'm going to click on before I click on it, right? I'm trying to give you the realness, right? So in that the spirit of keeping it real, I'm going to add this time dim in. Now I don't know that this time dim is actually going to join anything very well, but we're just going to do it anyway, right? Because the whole point is showing you examples of how to do these things. So that time dim is a different database. They're both SQL Server databases. They're both running in Amazon Web Services, as is the version of Cognos that I'm using right now, and so that's a SQL Server database. Mig asks a follow-up: Can the additional source be an uploaded file? Absolutely. So when I go add new sources, you'll see that I can choose to upload a file right away, from the data modules interface. I don't have one on this AWS machine that I'm demoing from, so I won't go through the upload live, but what I do have is this American Time Use.xlsx file. Now this is for sure not going to join anything in the Cognos samples, but again, just to show you guys how this works, I'll say okay, and you'll notice there's that Excel file. So now I've got in my one data module a table that is sourced from an Excel file in the American Time Use table that you see right here. The go time dim is from one SQL Server database. Everything else is from a different SQL Server database. So they all, and you can just kind of do this over and over and over again to where I could have 100 tables in here from 100 different sources. Now, would I recommend you do that? Under no circumstances, because the performance is likely to not be great. But you can do it. And there are some things you can do to mitigate that. That can help with that as well. So now I've got all of this stuff in here. Now the go time dim in the sales fact, if I take a look at what's in the go time dim, the date key, what format is the date key in? It looks like that, but date looks like that. And then on my new sales fact, the order number, not the order number, but the order date. Right, same format. So this is another thing I really like about this compared to Framework Manager is like how easy it is. So this is truly an example of like I uploaded a table and I really was not sure how I was going to join that table to my fact, but I was able to investigate it that quickly to determine like, yeah, I should be able to do a join here. So let's go ahead and join that in, and then I'll stop adding new tables into this unless there's something you guys really want to see in that regard, and then start to focus more on some of the other features of data modules, and then we'll move into the how do I deploy these and what are the best practices. I know that that's something a lot of people have questions on, and it's something that I've written about significantly on my blog. So the day date, right? So I can look at these and say, all right, those guys look like they match up. Let's match selected columns. Click refresh. It looks like it matches, right? Looks good. Okay, looks good. All right. So now at this point, I've got, in summary, I've got two views. In the past, we may have called these model query subjects. And then I've got all these normal tables. We would have called these database query subjects. And then I've got basically two views, two virtual objects, two virtual tables that I built in data modules that I've made look like a fact in a dimension, and then I'm joining them to an actual dimension from an actual data warehouse. Nick asks, how do you deal with multilingual data in data modules? Is it possible? It is not. So when we were talking about we're talking about what is it that you can't do in data modules? That's one of the things that you can't do in data modules today. So that is definitely a challenge. A bunch of good questions coming in. So Randy asks, should we really look into consolidating multiple data sources into a single data set? Single Parquet file should have better query performance than dynamically querying multiple sources and combining them on the app server. That's exactly right. So let's take a quick poll here, just a quick yes or no. How many of you in the chat are familiar with the data set functionality in Cognos 11? And while you guys are answering, I'll say Laura asks, will the view break if the source changes? So the view will break if something in the source that the view depends on changes, but it won't break if there's just some kind of general change to the source. So if I were to say add a new if we were to import a new field into one of the source tables or something like that, then it wouldn't have any impact on the view. But if I were to change like the definition of something, so what's really great about this is like let's say the order quantity, right? If I were to change the calculation, like how this is calculated, by going in here and I go into the expression editor and I do something funky, and then you have to, and then I click save, like all of that is going to flow through to the view. But if I were to like delete quantity completely, that is, then the view is going to have a problem because it's relying on a a field that's no longer there. And in fact, one of the things that I'd show you guys, let's just go ahead and do that. This is kind of cool. So I'll delete quantity. Now what I'm expecting to happen, there you go. Now you notice that this automatically popped up with an exclamation. So one of the things that's in this release that I really love is that it now has this validate on the fly feature. So you'll notice I didn't have to click the validate button or anything like that. As I'm doing things, it will auto-validate roughly every 2 seconds and automatically pop up with these notifications that I've done something that has broken something. And so I can automatically, or just right away, I know that I've hosed something up in the chain of tables to views to other tables. I know I've hosed something up, and I can automatically or easily go through and address it. So that's something that I really like. And it told me where everything was. Like, what did I break? How did I break it? I think that's a huge advance on this versus Framework Manager as well. So some of the other things that I would do, and at this point, this is one of the major best practices thing that I do is I build these views all the time in order to simplify things for presentation. And this is how I go about doing it to make it easy for people to consume. Now, some of the other things I can do here, one of the things that you would see, for example, if I were to bring in, say, a new table and I want to bring in the sales target. So I've got my sales fact, and then I brought in this sales target. Of course, it automatically does these joins, which again, I don't want it to do. And then I want to relate sales fact to the sales target. They're going to relate through they could really relate through both dimensions, but for the sake of our example today, we'll just do it through the product dimension. So I'll go ahead and choose to do a new relationship, swap this guy to many to one, and we're going to go ahead and join on product type code, match, okay. So now one of the big questions was in the past, and the limitations that we had here in data modules was, well, I can't do determinants. And for those of you who have done determinants, you've both felt the pain of determinants and you've seen how they can really solve some very serious problems when it comes to aggregating data across multiple grains of information. So a big question that I get, and something that was specifically asked on my LinkedIn post about today's live stream, was, how do I do determinants in data modules? And more specifically, can you please explain how the heck column dependencies work? So let's go ahead and get into that right now. So you'll see when I choose the product dimension, I have this specify column dependencies option. And the way that this works is you need to look at whatever table you're setting a column dependency on, and you define to the data module what is the grain of the table. So the first thing you're going to want to do here is you're going to want to grab the things that that are the keys and add them into your dimension. So in this case, well, the hierarchy of my dimension, if I think about it, is the number, the type, and the number, type, and line, right? Now, I don't have line code in here, so in this case I'm using the line en, but it all works the same way. So you come up with like the thing that defines the hierarchy of your dimension or your table. Works regardless whether it's kind of a classic dimension or not. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in order from the left to the right, or from the top to the bottom if it's easier for you to think that way. I'm going to put this in order from the least fine grain to the most fine grain. In that case, in that way, it's going to be line is going to go to type. So I actually drag the two tables to one another like that, and then type is going to go to number. Now you notice it's got this informational warning, and the informational warning is telling me, hey, you have items that are not in the column dependency group. So if anybody uses any of those items when they're building dashboards or reports, the column dependency is not going to apply to those items. So what I'm going to want to do then is I'm going to, I've got the keys that define the hierarchy in my dimension. Now I want to add the other elements of my dimension to those keys in order to create kind of groups. So what we'll do is we'll say, okay, well, product size is related to an individual product. So that is going to be grouped under product number. And then product name is also related to an individual product. So that is going to be grouped under product number. Likewise, product line EN is related to the product. Which one is the one that I'm missing here? This is what's so nice about this auto validate feature, is it'll just tell me. What haven't I put in here? Product type EN, right, okay. Product type EN is grouped to the product type code. So at this point, I'm done. This is the act of creating determinants in Framework Manager. I just went ahead and did that in my data module. And so now when Cognos processes the query that joins sales fact to product dimension to sales target, it's able to aggregate that information properly because I define things that way. So really, kind of that's the first level of how you're going to do this. That makes so much more sense. I know it is so much better than what was in Framework Manager. And I'll be honest, the first few times I popped open that screen, I could not make heads or tails of it. And IBM's documentation is just truly is not good for it. Except there is one, and so here's a little nugget for you guys. If you follow my blog, IBMBlueView.com, or my colleague Sonia Fournier's blog, AtlanticCognosAnalytics.com, I think we're both going to have some articles coming up that will outline some of the ways to think about this stuff. But the one thing, so the documentation in the normal IBM documentation is really bad. Sorry, IBM. But one thing they did publish that is great, and I'm just going to paste this into the live chat here. So this document will show you how to is a great walkthrough of building column dependencies, building relative time functionality, and then how to combine the two to make sure your column dependencies and your relative time both process correctly when you're invoking both of those features at the same time. In other words, if I were to, like in the sales fact here, I'll just build some relative time real quick so that this will make a little more sense. To add the relative time functionality in, I go to add new sources, and then I'm going to migrate to calendars and then grab the fiscal calendar. I do that. You'll notice it gets brought in as a linked module or an item from a linked module, and then it's automatically hidden so your end users won't see it. And then what we can do is, so I'll go into my sales fact and I'm just going to grab order date and do so because I actually have a time dim, it's maybe better to do on the time dim, but whatever. I'll do it here just to show you guys how this works. So if I go into the properties of order date and then you see lookup reference, I set to fiscal calendar. Once I did that, it automatically creates these filters. So these are like filters in Framework Manager where you can just drag them in and apply them to tables, visualizations, that sort of thing. Works exactly the same way, except building them was really that easy. And this was the feature that made me say, okay, all of my customers need to start using these. Before that, I was like, well, if you really have a good use case, then we'll go ahead and do it. But now it's like you guys just got to get on this because of how easy that was. Because anybody who's tried to do this knows that it's it's challenging sometimes to do in a DMR. I mean, Transformer made it easy, right? Building these in a DMR can be challenging to get right. And then if you've ever tried to build these relationally, you know that there are calculations you can write that will kind of give you this type of stuff. But man, is it hard. Figuring out the first time you do it as like a Cognos newbie is just like brain melting. So that's just as easy as that. And then I can do the same thing on my measures. So I can go ahead and say, well, now I would like unit cost or unit sale price. I would like that to be a relative measure as well. So or have relative time. So I'll go to lookup reference, and there I've got my relative time measures. So now that I have those in here, in order for those and the column dependencies to process at the same time, that document that I linked will show you how to do it. And it also gives a really good walkthrough of those two features kind of independent of one another. Highly recommend you read through that. It's long, kind of hard to understand, definitely written from a highly technical perspective, but it's really great. And I don't know that IBM's ever really told anybody that it's out there. I don't know if it's even linked from the actual support documentation. So with that said, I know you guys have asked a lot of questions that I haven't addressed. So I'll go ahead and address those now. So for R4, where is the uploaded data stored for datasets? So for R4, the uploaded data is stored in the Cognos content store. The way this works, when you upload data, when you build a data set, or when you upload an Excel file, this process behind the scenes is exactly the same. You upload that. It does not actually store the Excel file in Cognos. What it does is it reads the Excel file in, and it loads that data into an Apache Parquet file. Parquet is a very commonly used columnar file type for storing data. It takes that Parquet, very common. Like if you've seen any of this stuff I've been doing lately with Incorda product, which if you're interested in knowing more about, you should message me because I love it. But that uses Parquet files as well. Lots of stuff uses Parquet files. What Cognos does with the Parquet file is it takes it and it actually puts it into the content store, and it houses it there until someone makes a request to an application server that needs the Parquet file. At that point, what it does is it doesn't send a SQL query to the Parquet file. What it does is it does a check on the application server, and it says, do I have a local copy of this Parquet file? And if I do, if no, then it fetches it from the content store, loads it onto the application server, just moves the file itself onto the application server. And you can see this in the data folder of the folder structure for your Cognos install directory. Loads it into the application server, and then from there loads it into memory so that people can interact with it, right? If there's already a copy on the application server, it checks to see if there's a fresher copy in the content store. If there is, then it does the same process. It loads the newer copy onto the application server, and then from there loads it into the memory of the application server so that queries can be processed. So that's the overall flow of how those things go. Jerry asks because he wants to know how much server storage he needs to allow for. So the Parquet files in general are pretty small, right? If you're having content store sizing problems, I would say the most likely culprit by far is saved PDFs. After that, it would be saved HTML output. Parquet files I would look to third. So if you're like, holy cow, I've got a 200 gig content store, I need to shrink this thing, I would start with the PDFs there and then go to the stored HTML, and then I would start to look at Parquet files because these do, for the most part, condense down significantly. That's not to say they can't cause problems, they can, but I would look at those other things first. Okay, so a bunch of other great questions. Eric asks, does data module based on existing package inherit the package's security? So when you build a data module off of an existing package, the way to do that, I'll show you. honestly, I don't really do this. So I'll show it to you. And for those of you, I recognize that we're up against 3 o'clock. I am I'm happy to go long. So if you have to drop off now, thank you very much for coming. It would be remiss of me not to just make sure I share this with you guys. So this is the events page, pmsquare.com/events. If you do have to leave now that it's 3, I really appreciate you tuning in today. A lot of great questions. I really love doing these and interacting with you. So thank you for coming. I will keep going for maybe another 15 or 20 or 30 minutes just to make sure, because there's a couple points I haven't made that I really want to make sure that I make during the live stream, and questions that I haven't answered that I know you're interested in. For those of you who do have to leave before you go, I did want to point out a couple of events that are coming up. So pmsquare.com/events. The obviously all about data modules is today, right? On November 20th, if you're in Wisconsin at all, or even Chicago, North Burbs, and making it to Brookfield, Wisconsin is something you could do. I will be at the Q4 Wisconsin user group, so please do come and say hello and ask me any follow-up questions you have. We have a lot of great content for that. And then a couple other things to point out. So we run every month. We run public training. These are online training courses where they're instructor-led online. So Sonia Fournier, whose blog I mentioned earlier, she delivers these trainings. She's our trainer. She's a fantastic trainer. On November 20th, we will have a public training, online public training data modules course. So if you would like some instructor-led training that goes through a lot of what I've showed here, plus other features, she's an incredible trainer. And all of our courses are custom courses. So we do not teach out of the IBM catalog. We build all of our own training. The data modules course Sonia and I built together. It contains a lot of the types of insights that you've been seeing here today. So if that's something you're interested in, get a hold of us. That will be running November 20th and December 12th. And then finally on December 6th, if you're in Chicago, there's going to be a business analytics roadshow. So that will have lots of different information about IBM's business analytics portfolio. Again, PM Square will be there. I will probably be in town for that one. Who are we kidding? I'll be in town for that one. So if you're in the Chicago area and going to Milwaukee's out of the question, and you'd like to swing by and say hello, that'd be a great place to do it too. So with that said, I'm just going to take a peek. Like I said, I'm happy to continue going here. It looks like we've got still a lot of good questions rolling in. Addressing Eric's question. So I can add a framework manager model in here, and what that's going to do is, let me just grab Go Sales Query. Okay. Now you'll notice it just looks like a table, and in reality, what I can do is I could join, say, Go Sales Query to something in here like Sales Target, and I can create a relationship that that between like a single table and my data module. So like if I wanted to make a join, and again, I'm not really sure what we should have. What do we have here? Retailer name, product type code. Is there product type information on here? No. Where would there be product type information? I don't know. Let's just do it here. Yeah, of course there isn't anything. We have the product type code. Do we have product type name on here? No. Oh, there it is. Okay. So you'll see what I really just did is I did a join between this table and like the entire Go Sales query model. So so it does inherit all the security. Like when the Cognos creates a query that goes down this path into the framework manager model, I'm like 93% sure it inherits. It will use the security that's in this model, but it doesn't automatically apply to this other stuff. And honestly, I don't recommend you do this. What I recommend you do, if there is something you want to get out of a framework manager model that you want to join into a data module, what I would do is create a data set that contains those items. And I would not bother with trying to actually join in all of that type of stuff to create a relationship between a single table in your data module and your entire framework manager model. That's just generally not the way I go about doing that. So, but that is something that you can do. Other questions in here: is the process only available for relational sources? As in, you couldn't join to planning analytics or something similar. That's true. So right now you can't do that, but you will be able to. That is coming out. I don't know if it's coming out in R5, but it's definitely coming in the next few releases where data modules will be able to handle kind of dimensional sources like planning analytics or power cubes or analysis services cubes. What I do today when I'm working with dimensional sources, and this is something I've actually done in production for customers, is I build a data set off of the say the analysis services cube. So I had a case where a customer wanted to join 2 analysis services cubes to 3 tables from their data warehouse, and doing it through the data warehouse was going to take forever. So I created one data set off of cube A, one data set off of cube B, joined them to the 3 tables from the warehouse. Then I actually built a data set on top of that because the performance was better on a single data set. So generally, that's what I do when I'm working with a dimensional source. Obviously, once that becomes something that's directly integrated into here, I would that would be a little less necessary. You still might want to do it for performance reasons, but you wouldn't have to. Other questions? So Caesar, can we make a live for Agile Metrics dashboard? I'm struggling to create some of them here. I'm not sure exactly what it is you're getting at there, Caesar. If you could rephrase the question, I'll get to it. If one of the underlying tables in the data modules has to be changed, even though it has the same columns, can I change it? Same as editing the definition in FM. So, yeah. So it depends. Like if you want to swap out the table entirely, I guess I haven't done that before. I'm not sure if it would work or not through the UI, but one way that I'm sure that you could do it, and this gets to a question that someone asked on my LinkedIn post was so if I hit Control /Q, you'll see that it actually brings up the data module. Actually brings up the data module specification. So what I can do now is in cases where like I want to do kind of a bulk change to something, this, because of the way I'm viewing this, it's like got me like I can't see the top or bottom of the window here. Whoa. Okay, there we go. Oh, everything locked up. Everything locked up. What is going on? Okay, this might be because I'm using a remote desktop. Could be a remote desktop issue. Yep, remote desktop issue. So, so you can actually export this into something like Notepad++ and make bulk changes into it. So one of the questions that I got on my live stream, does page up work here? How about home? Yeah, there we go. So you can see I can copy this and I can edit it. So one thing, Cognos will automatically classify things, and a lot of times it gets a lot of like keys as identifiers or identifiers as measures and measures as identifiers. If you want to do like a you can export this to Notepad++ and do like a bulk search for anything that's marked identifier, and if like do like a, Notepad++ has that step through find and replace where you can look at each identifier and say, do I want to replace the word identifier with the word, measure, for example. That would be one way to do that. The other thing you can do once you kind of get a handle for this is things that don't work through the user interface, you can make changes directly to the specification that will work. So that would be, if you, I don't know for sure if I can just wholly swap out a table, like instead of table A, now it's table B, but because it has all the same column names and all the same identifiers, like, does it work? And so that, that is how I would go about addressing that if it doesn't work. Or if you want to do like bulk find and replace that you can't do. You can make bulk changes. Like if I wanted to change all of these to something else, I can control click all of them and then go properties, and you'll notice the property applies to all of them. So if I want to change all of them from an identifier to an attribute, I can do that, right? But you can't. There's no like search for all identifiers. The way I would do it is going through going through the specification, which again, that's control /Q. Same thing works in dashboards, by the way, to open up the dashboard spec. So other questions that we got in here, I'll blah blah blah, very nice name. I will get to the show you how you get to the fiscal calendars in a second. Can you use SSAS tabular? You cannot. Cognos cannot query SSAS tabular yet. That will be coming in a future release. Nick asks, is there a maximum size for the data set? And then Jerry mentions he called IBM about the file's limitation. So when you talk about the size of the data sets, there's two ways to think about it. The first way to think about the size of the data set is the actual size of the file, and then the second one is the number of rows. So the size of the file, I'm not aware of any limitation. Now, when you want to say how to adjust the Java heap size defined on the Cognos side server, I'll show you where it is. If you go into the Manage menu, and then you go into the Administration console, this takes you into the old school admin console. Now, and you guys will have to forgive me if I'm clicking around here a little bit, because I hardly ever go into this view anymore. But if I go, I go into here, and then I look at the query service, okay? And then on the query service, I go to set properties, and then I go to settings, and then if you go to advanced settings. So the first thing you want to do, Jerry, is here's the setting for the JVM size for your query service. But even beyond that, these don't process on the query service anymore. They process on the what the heck do they call that? The compute service. So there's no compute setting in the UI. You have to click on advanced settings, and then I don't remember. Actually, it's this, I believe. qs.queryexecution.flintserver.maxheap, and then you set a value in there. So if you want to increase the size of the file, like the maximum file size that can be loaded into memory for data sets, that's how you do it. That was a deep cut. Is it more efficient just doing relationships plus view or a join table? So as far as the SQL that's generated, I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure which one is more efficient. As far as which one I prefer to do for kind of just the simplicity of the UI, I prefer to do the relationships plus a view rather than a join table. But that's a good question. I'll take a note and see, just do some looking at it to see if I can figure out which one makes more, generates better SQL. I'm not sure off the top of my head. How did you do that thing with the fiscal calendars where it auto-created those date filters? So what I did was, first of all, the fiscal calendar comes from IBM. Now you can customize these. Customizing these is, Jerry says that I have an echo problem. Does anybody else have an echo problem? Hopefully not. Severe echo. Did that fix anything? Did it just start? Yeah, my PC mic should be off. That's weird. So I didn't actually make any changes. The great thing about live streaming is it's surprisingly complicated. There's so many things that could be going wrong. Okay. Let's see if that improved anything. One thing I can do. Okay, so I've got it so that I can actually hear myself for a second. And let me just look into the device settings for my... Okay, let's try this. Yeah, I mean, I apologize, guys. That's extremely annoying. I really have no idea what could have changed on my end that... Do I like secretly have... No, nothing there. I'm going to spend 2 more minutes working on this, and then if it's bearable, I guess I'll... I blame society, yeah. Yeah, what the heck? Okay, let's minimize out of this guy. This picture I actually took in Iceland. I'm really... It's by far the best photo I've ever taken. I'm not a good photographer. I don't know how it turned out that way. Okay. Open sound settings, input, yep. Manage sound devices. Okay, that should be disabled. The other thing would be disable that. Let's see if that is that any better? Is that? I also blame society. Could you... Yeah, let's see. Okay. I'm just waiting to see if... I turned off all the other mics, which you guys... So we should... The delay's gotten really severe too. One thing I could do is just end stream and then restart the stream. That's not going to hurt anything. Okay, it didn't. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to end the stream. I'm going to relaunch it. I'll be right back.